Okay, so for duotone, I take my flat colors, I duplicate them onto a new layer. I rename that layer duotone, and I am showing you hard edge duotone. So I'm going to use a lasso with 0 pixel feather, and then I'm just going to select things. So I can do this large or small. I'll start small. So let's say I want to highlight right here. And I want to highlight, I can hold down Shift, and I want to highlight right here. And where else might I want to highlight? Maybe up here. Hold down Shift. Kind of where you start the maze. Maybe on the top of the swoosh here. Now this is with 0 pixel feather. Maybe I want just a little highlight. Oops. What happened? There we go. Hold down Shift, maybe another little highlight just here in the brow. Then I can go to Image, Adjustment. I can do Levels, which is usually how I do it, and I just brighten all of those. You can see them brighten. It's subtle. Or I can darken them if I want shadows. But if your colors are already super saturated, this won't do too much. So the other tool that actually is more related to coloring is, you just want to be careful, is hue saturation. So when we're doing duotone, the only slider you want to play with on hue saturation is the lightness slider. So if I want to add lightness, I push this up. If I want to take it away, I push it down from 0. So that would be shadows, this would be highlights. And lo and behold, I deselect, and I start to have very subtle, controllable duotone color. It's basically, if I turn off my black line art, it's just kind of breaking it up into different tones. Same thing for shadows. Exact same process on my duotone layer. But this time, I'll do a shadow inside the mouth and on the tongue. There's my selection. And I'm going to go to Image, Adjustment, Levels, and I'm going to push it, the midtone slider, to the right. I can also play with Image Adjustment, Hue Saturation. As long as I don't mix with the hue or the saturation, I just play with the lightness. I can make it lighter or darker. These are not changing the color. They're just changing basically the amounts of white or black that are added to it. That makes the mouth pop a lot, more than the flat color did. What if I want to do a little ridge down the nose of darkness? I can go across all these colors. Just set their levels and darken them. And sometimes that will saturate them, just like burning them would. So you can also play with hue saturation. Now what you don't want to play with is the hue, because that will actually change the color. Now because it's a fox, I think it would make sense to have some dark under the eyes. But what if I don't want to affect all of it? Because if I just do a lasso over all of my duotone color like this, and then I darken, it will look like that. Which I think looks kind of cool, but maybe I don't want the green to darken. Maybe I don't want this yellow to darken. So I can do a targeted, clean duotone as well. And this is how. First I use my magic wand with contiguous turned on. And I select the orange. I select the thing I want to darken. Or I select the orange and the green. And then I go in with my lasso. And then I can erase away from that selection, or I can add to that selection, or I can duplicate that selection. And then use my levels adjustment to darken or to lighten. And then I can use my lasso, because I just did the orange and the one green eye. And I can start erasing away. So now I want the old highlights to appear here on this side of the orange. And here on this side of the orange. So you can really break up your colors into these light and dark versions using hard edge duotone. I'm going to do it with the reds as well. I'm going to select all the reds from my duotone layer underneath. I'm going to duplicate them. And this time I'm going to make them brighter. Oh, I'm on the wrong layer. I want to be on my duplicate. Come on, select. There we go. Make them brighter. And then I can erase away where I want that to transition. I tend to overdo dodging and burning. I tend to overdo the contrast of my duotone. So it's nice to have it in these different steps that I can modify. You know, I can actually play with the saturation of them and the opacity of the individual layers. Okay, before I get too far with this, you can also play with blending modes, like overlay, like lighten, pin light. All of this will help your duotones. Multiply to darken. And then I tend to put all of that into one folder. All these kind of duotone options into one folder. But let's add a few more. Let's darken the bottom of the chin here. And the bottom swoosh. And maybe some of this kind of fur around the bottom. So getting color variations. Make it as complex as you want. Now on your final exam, in order to be fully competent in digital art, you're going to need to be able to recognize these different coloring styles. You know, recognize if something is only flat colored, or if something is duotone, or if something is full color or full spectrum. So we're going to get into all of those. So I try to demonstrate all of them so you can see, but we also have them in those different slide presentations. You can get lots of different approaches and practices to them. All right, and now I'm going to do image adjustment. Let's do hue saturation this time. And I'm just going to take the lightness on them all down a little. Very subtle. Then deselect. All right. So I've got some duotone in there. This is a way you can fully control it. If there's anything you ever want to lighten up, you can go the other way. If I want to lighten this top of the eye back up, I can just do image adjustments, levels, or hue saturation. Brighten it up. See that? And I will do this in different ways in different places. If I feel like I need to darken an area, maybe right here. Image adjustment, hue saturation, just lightness and darkness. So I think I might want to brighten it right there. Now there are some kind of procedural ways we can play with this too. If I want to add a little light inside here, I can just create shapes, brighten them. But it's all based on there being color there in the first place. So the analogy I used in my morning class is your flat color is like putting peanut butter between two slices of bread. It's really basic. It's maybe a little dry. Duotone is like adding jelly on top of the peanut butter, but you do it as a separate layer. Because if you mix the jelly in with the peanut butter into the same layer, and you decide you have too much jelly, you can't remove the jelly without also removing peanut butter, right? So you stack them as different layers so you can play with opacity, you can play with how strong each flavor is in your sandwich. But as you're adding more complexity. Now this is what is called cut-edge duotone, or hard-edged. Next I'm going to show you soft-edge duotone. So I'm going to save my work. Now duotone is any time you're splitting your local color into highlights and shadows. So I'm going to move all of those into a folder, just like I did for my flat color, and it's going to call it duotone hard. Now, an easy way to make soft edge duotone is to duplicate that, merge that together so it's all one duotone layer. And remember, that's all of your coloring so far, right? Just now it has duotone in it. And then to soften it, you do this. It's the only filter we use reliably in the class. Let's look at some of the hard edges. You go to filter and you go to blur, Gaussian blur. This gives you the most control. You use this radius slider and you can decide how soft you want it to be. And now what used to be a hard edge is now gradated and blended. And you might like how that looks more than the hard edge underneath. So that's the hard edge. That's the soft edge. So now I rename this duotone soft. So that was with a filter. That's the only filter we use reliably. So I made a duplicate of my hard edge duotone layer. And we always make duplicates. It's like another layer in the sandwich. And then, I'll just do it again. Because I had multiple duotone layers, I had them in a group. So I duplicated the whole group folder. And then in order to do this, I had to merge them together. So then I right-click and I merge them. So now it's just a duplicate of my hard edges. Then I go to filter. And the only filter we're going to use reliably is blur Gaussian blur, which tells the computer to take away information. And we get to say how much. How much do you want to blur it? So I'm looking at these hard edges in my coloring, and I am then blurring them. And softening that gradation. I really like that blurring there. From the highlight duotone to the dark duotone, in between the local color. And it just blends it all together. Creates kind of gradients between them. If you do it too much, it just looks like a mess. So you find what level works well for you. Now, some illustrators are really disciplined. They only use soft edge. They only use hard edge.